Thank you. Thank you, Jules. Okay. Welcome all to my talk, to my live coding sessions. They say that you shouldn't be doing live coding sessions while on stage, but I decided to do the opposite, okay? Because I want to learn Spark SQL even better, and with all the days when I was alone with Spark SQL, with the code, well, it's time out. It's time to show off what I know, what I don't know, hear your questions, and learn more together, okay? So, here it is, extending Spark SQL 2.4. We are going to develop extensions to Spark 2.4.4, the latest and greatest of Spark. And just a friendly warning, things are changing constantly at a very fast pace. So what I'm gonna show you, although it's brand new and the latest and greatest, is gonna change. Yes. That's the future of big data, AI, and whatever buzzwords you could put into this intro. So 2.4.4, the latest and greatest. If you want to try it out with the, with what's coming in 3.0, things may break. Yeah, that's fairly expected. But again, it depends on what you're going to support. Whether it's going to be something that's going to, be available soon, 3.0, oops, or 2.4.4, which is available already. Okay, and by the way, I did one, hopefully it's not going to cause any problems. I upgraded my brand new Mac OS and MacBook Pro to the latest and greatest. So I'm now on Mac OS Catalina for since 1 day, so I'm 1 day user of this system. Second, I switch some software, and again, it's to have fun. Where else could we have more fun than on stage, right? Rather than in production. So, live coding session starts now. I'm Jacek Laskowski, and I'm very happy, very excited to be here because I'm gonna share my passion and love to Spark. I've been with Spark for around 5 years now, and I can't think of a day without Spark. These people from Databricks, from other companies are so crazy. They develop so crazy software. They keep me busy, exploring all the niceties they buried or they used to develop this nice distributed platform called Apache Spark. So I'm a freelancer, freelance IT consultant. I've been working with Spark, Kafka, and Kafka streams for the past 5 years only. And so if you call me, you need me for anything, if you don't start with Spark or Kafka, just hang up and just don't continue this conversation because we've got nothing to talk about, okay? I'm hoping that I'm developing code in a proper way. I'm consulting people, mentoring. Given my age, I'm more mentor rather than full-time coder these days. And tons of speaking. I love talking, as you will see in a moment. I'm also writing 5 books, internals of, and 3 about Spark, 2 about Kafka. And I'm among the contributors to Apache Spark. Yes, and quite recently, I've been appointed to this, exclusive group of Kafka enthusiasts or people who are contributing to Kafka too. So I'm in this class of, 12.19 and 12.12. Okay, and so if you've got any questions, especially during this session or after this session and later, contact me at this email, jacek@japila.pl, or find me at Stack Overflow. Okay, that's it. I'm glad that I did this because I would have forgotten. Okay, so let me see you guys. And okay, thank you. So, why should you care about developing new data source? That should be, if it's not, that should be your very first question while working with Apache Spark. Why should I extend it since it's so powerful already? Well, the problem you might be facing is that whatever data source you want to access data from, might not be fully or even slightly supported by Apache Spark. You'd have to code this, access to this data source yourself, or you would ask your developers, data scientists, data engineers, to do this, for you, rather than having fun with Apache Spark. So the purpose of this talk is to show you how to extend Spark SQL 244 just to avoid any time-consuming conversations with your users. Why Spark is so troublesome? Why is it so why is it not user-friendly as they announce it at Spark Summit or any other conference? Okay, so that's one point. So you should be asking this question. Is my data, or is the data that I need, available for Spark? If answer is no, think about this session, think about developing a brand new data source. So you allow structured queries access data that's managed by platforms that are not supported by Spark out of the box. I've been working on 2 connectors. I'm familiar with 4 external data systems, but 2 of them are public. So Splice Machine and Google Cloud Spanner, they were not available for Spark, for structured queries. Now they are, because of the work I did for these 2 connectors. And again, this is about making this loading or writing data from or to external systems easier for your developers, data scientists, data engineers, whoever could use Spark. Okay, so let's talk about this nitty-gritties of what it takes to develop a brand new data source. We know why we should care about developing brand new data source. Now the obvious question is what it takes to develop, to offer brand new data source. So think about data source as a framework or abstraction in quotes, because it's not a single class, single type. There are a couple of classes you need to implement or extend. So it's an abstraction. It's a pluggable abstraction to let your external systems be readily available for Spark SQL, for all the structured queries, all the goodies that you can find in Spark SQL. So I use this abstraction in a loose way, okay? You've got built-in data sources, for Parquet, Kafka, JSON, Avro, CSV. There are some text formats that are not best suited for big data. There are better file formats like Parquet. There are also systems like Kafka that use their own formats, or they leverage formats like Avro. So now the question is how easy it is to plug in to Kafka topics and read Avro data. Well, it's not complicated, but it could be better. Okay, so this session definitely answered this question. What it would take to extend existing data sources and make this connection to Kafka slightly better. Okay, and again, what I usually forget when I'm showing people how to develop brand new data sources is that this is not only for programmers. What we are going to do is equally for programmers, people who are fond of using Scala, Java, or even SQL, but also for people who are less familiar with coding, with Python and what I already mentioned, SQL. So people who are not really into coding, they need to use Spark for something more sophisticated. Okay. So what are we going to do is equally available for programmers as well as for data engineers and non-programmers like data scientists. Okay, and nice thing about this data source is that it allows, for new data sources. And I'll be using 2 terms or 2 sets of terms interchangeably, source and readers. Sources and readers are the same. They differ slightly because they refer to different versions of this API I'm going to show you. But again, the concept is the same. sources and readers are about loading data, while sinks or writers are about writing data to external system. And when I say load or write, I am not saying this process will happen at the time you are going to use the data source. No, it's gonna be postponed after Spark SQL decides that this query you wrote is the best available, okay, after all these optimizations. So due to the, or because of this pluggable abstraction, we can plug ourselves into this and leverage all the goodies that are available out of the box in Spark SQL. Good. And this is the goal of the session, allows for new data sources. Good. So before developing new data source, you are convinced you need data source. Now the question is, okay, are there any other questions I should be thinking of, I should be answering before I start coding? We, especially coders, developers, are eager to just start coding and then realizing that it's more than they were prepared for. So there are questions you need to keep in mind while or before developing new data source. You need data source. Now the questions are, what Spark version to support? Things are changing constantly, okay, at fast pace. So you need to decide whether it's gonna be 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, or upcoming version 3.0. All these versions may require custom development, okay, for the very same data source. So you need to be extra clever to avoid all the headaches afterwards with this, upgrades to latest and greatest. Now, the other question is, should we be supporting DataSource API V1 or V2? You've got no idea what I'm talking about, but still, now, or after the session, you will know there are two APIs, and none are, so to speak, official these days, okay? To me, long-term observer, both are used interchangeably. Most of the, if not all, built-in data sources migrated to the modern DataSource API V2, yet V2 is not officially announced as the DataSource API. So, and we know that 3.0 is bringing even more changes. Then, are you interested in loading data only, or writing data only, or both sides? Okay, this is also the question about how much to develop for your users. Is it only for reading, or writing, or both? Is this only for Spark SQL, for batch queries, or perhaps for Spark Structured Streaming too? Spark Structured Streaming uses all the infrastructure provided by Spark SQL. So now the obvious question is, should we be supporting batch queries only, or perhaps think about streaming too? With streaming, there are two further questions, like micro-batch stream processing or continuous stream processing. And again, the answer is not obvious. Okay? To all these questions, answers are not obvious. It depends. For example, Spark version is not as easy as to say, hey, it's just dependency on my in my build SBT or POM XML or Gradle, build Gradle, whatever. It's about what you will see, what you will have in production, whether it's Cloudera, Hadoop distribution, Mapr, well, it's gone. Hortonworks is gone too. So, but you could, work with custom Spark installations. Any other questions? Or you are overwhelmed with these questions I gave you? Yeah, perhaps. Okay, so dataframe reader. Some of you may have seen it already. After you know that the front doors to Spark SQL is Spark Session. You need to have Spark Session to do anything in Spark SQL. You start with Spark Session. Back in the old days, while we were, happy with RDD API, we had to have Spark context. Now Spark context is gone. It's too low level. We don't have to think about it. We are only familiar, or we should be only familiar with Spark session. After the Spark session.read, you get this access to something that's called, to this abstraction called dataframe reader. Dataframe reader describes the input data source. As a matter of fact, what I found out yesterday, or figured out myself yesterday, was that the purpose of this API is to describe input data source. Exactly what I said, but this is just discovery of yesterday, okay? Which is obvious for many of you, but it was not for me, even though I've been working with Spark for 5 years, with Spark SQL 3, something like this. But anyway, it's about words. So think about data frame reader as a description, metadata about your input data source. So whether your data source is supported or not depends on the contracts data frame reader supports. And we'll see what they are in a moment. So data frame reader is just a fluent interface to describe input data source. It's to load data, but again, I'm using quotes to say it's just to describe how to load data rather than load data physically. There is no loading at the time you start describing your loading process. So just to show you some code, because you are eager to see some code. Okay. So that's the code. So when you do Spark shell, demo gods are here. Glad to meet them again. Come on. Okay. Awesome. Just when I was in hotel, while I was preparing my talk, I noticed that when I was connected to Wi-Fi, all my code didn't work. It stopped working. It was like, what am I gonna do? I just upgraded to the latest and greatest of Catalina and macOS, Java. It should all work, but it didn't. It turned out I had to disable my Wi-Fi. It worked without Wi-Fi. I can't explain why, but here I'm on stable internet access via Ethernet. So I'm fine. I'm saved. Okay, as you can see, it's Spark version. It's 2.4. Okay, can you see it? If not, please feel free to switch your seat and get closer. So Spark 2.4, that's the latest and greatest. Now, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, what's your name? Heng? Okay, let me try to write it down, okay? We just met. And I apologize for any mistakes, okay? That's my Polish pronunciation of his name, okay? I'm from Poland, Warsaw, not Holland, by the way. I spreche nicht Deutsch, Dutch. So, Spark read format and Hugh, you said. Thank you. So, let's pretend he said Hugh, okay? That's what I had. So, and you can expect that Hugh is not supported by Spark yet. We'll convince Spark to support Hugh, okay? So, when I press enter, you see, it's okay. Well, let me change it to this. It's definitely not supported by Spark, right? It's okay. I only describe what's gonna happen when I start describing this when I compose something I could consider data flow. Okay, diagram of nodes that are interconnected. It's a directed acyclic graph of nodes that talk to each other. They pass information from one node to another, and that's pretty much Spark SQL. Yeah, that's that easy. So, but eventually, as you see here, eventually you need to do load, okay? So when you do this load, you finish describing the input point, okay? The input. So let's see what's gonna happen when I do load. No data source like this. And then you see this famous question on Stack Overflow, class not found exception, failed to find data source, blah, 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 please find packages at blah, blah, blah. Okay, and you start reading all the documentation, day passes by, and you've got nothing. Your supervisors, your managers keep asking you, when are you going to deliver the code? You say, it was meant to be easy, but it's not. I need 1 week more. Not anymore. After the session, it's gone, okay? No more excuses like this. So, what you need to do is to register brand new data source, okay? So just for the sake of this presentation, let me copy this. Okay, I'm very brave these days. And I change my code. This is IntelliJ IDEA. You see anything here? Probably not. And presentation mode. Blah, blah, blah. Saying, what is presentation mode? There should be, okay. Enter presentation mode. They changed it. And I upgraded IntelliJ IDEA just before this presentation. Why did I do this? Never ever upgrade your software before your presentation, especially live coding session. Please, do me a favor. Okay, so you see more, okay? Hopefully. So I'm going to change this Spark read format, and I assume some expertise in Spark SQL, and I'm going to change this to show you that this brand new data source is not available, and I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to run it. It's just a test. Run it, and we should see exactly the same exception that this is not available. Which is fine. Okay, class not found exception, failed to find data source, which is okay. And by the way, just to make it more comfortable for your eyes, let me switch to Sandbox and Spark AI Summit and SBT. That's the best tool you can imagine for development, Java 8, because, and SBT. Okay, and now, ladies and gentlemen, we've got pretty much, and by the way, this is the latest and greatest too, 1.3.3. It was released 2 days ago or something. So with brand new Cursor support. So you should really upgrade this. It's definitely much faster these days. So, and then you can just run, test and run main, and you've got this new data source test, okay? And I run it, and I get this lovely exception. You see, well, there are more exceptions than we expected. Failed to find data source. Okay, good. So we are all set for our development. So let's develop this crazy named data source. Wish I picked different name, but anyway. Okay, the first problem is, let me go back to my slides, okay? So to make you feel more comfortable. So you saw that we tried to load a data source, brand new data source. It was not available. So what are we supposed to do to make this data source available? Well, as you will see in Spark SQL's own code, there is this process of loading data sources. And it uses the very fine Java Service Loader API. It's here. You don't see it, but you are not supposed to see it here. Just believe that there is this data source, lookup data source, and under the covers, there is Java's service loader. The service loader goes over all meta-inf services entries and finds entries with proper interface and collects all this information to give us the provider of our data source. I'll show you this in a moment in a better font, okay? So just worth noticing are these pieces of this code. This is taken directly from Spark SQL. Data source, lookup data source. Then you see interfaces like DataSource V2. This is definitely for DataSource API V2, something you should consider, but not necessarily now, today, but in the future, definitely. And by the way, it may or may not be available in 3.0 because it's only to support 2 different APIs. And since 3.0 is a breaking release, you know, they can't break anything they promise. So making this platform even more stable. So it may or may not be available, you know, in this 3.0 version because, well, it's no longer needed, because there is no support for the old version of this data source and the brand new one. Okay, it's up to them, up to Spark developers, main developers, not like myself. So read support is part of data source, and there is also DataSource V2 relation. So these 3 interfaces or contracts are to support brand new modern data source APIs or data sources based on this modern data source V2, okay? And you will notice that at the end, just as a fallback case, you've got this, let me go here, load V1 source and load V1 source. It's highly sophisticated code. You don't have to spend much time on it. Just remember that if you don't know what to know about data source V2, you can easily switch to load V1 source. So that's much better now. As you can see, this is load V source, and load V source, V1 source, we'll be focusing on right now. Okay, we'll skip this data source V2 for later. So load V1 source is very basic, very simple for people familiar with Scala code, and maybe for others too. Hope so. So as you can see, Spark session is used to create base relation or convert base relation to dataframe. There are 2 abstractions. One is dataframe. This is for developers, for end users, if we may say so. And base relation is to people integrators, for us. So we create this base relation based on the information, and among them is this source. You see, it's here. This source tells us the name we use here. Here. So this is the name that's passed in as source. Okay? So this name is given to this data source, and then this data source is requested to resolve this relation. In other words, hey, Spark, try to find implementation for this data source. So there are this DataSource API, there is this data source register that you will use to register your alias, and then you've got this DataSource API V1. This is a link to GitHub for all the code, and DataSource API V2. And we spent half an hour for the slides, and even though I promise we'll be coding all the time, right? So yeah, I'll take another picture, so just to keep people informed that you stayed longer than half an hour. Awesome. Good, thank you. And then it should be live coding, shouldn't it? So let's do live coding now. So for the rest of this presentation, there'll be no slides. Slides will be available afterwards. Let's see what we can develop in the remaining 10 minutes plus another 40 minutes. Okay, so 15 minutes, 5-0. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's start from scratch. I love it. Let's challenge ourselves, and let's close this project to create brand new project, create new project. And this is Scala SBT. And then, what's the name of this? Hue data source. Why not? Okay, so we've got the Spark 7, blah, 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 Java 8, because this is what Spark supports these days. And SBT, fine. And Scala, no, 2.13. Only 2.12 is the latest and greatest that Spark supports, okay? And finish. Good. So we've got this. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we, download half the internet. We have it on our, laptop. I bought, bigger hard drive just to accommodate all the jars. You and I created happily and open sourced. So now it's done. Fine. Okay, and that's us, this IntelliJ idea and me and you watching what I'm doing. And so far so good, right? Okay, so, and by the way, this is IntelliJ idea. It's not TextMate, it's not Atom, even though I love these tools. I disabled all these distractions, so if you try to ping me now, I'm not available, and so my wife, kids, all they know that, I'm busy, okay? Me and IntelliJ idea. We have this conversation. So, let's start with a test. So, and I'm not gonna be too fancy. I'm not gonna prove that I'm, hardcore 100%, full-blown developer, Scala developer with all the, functional programming skills. No. What I'm gonna do is just a basic Scala class called Hue test, or even DS test, or data source test. Why not? And this is gonna be object, and people familiar with Scala, they know already that I'm gonna extend app and I'm done. I'm done with what I wanted to, show you. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is just to val Spark, and now Spark session. Will it work? No. Why? Because we haven't changed build SBT yet. So let me open build, not symbols, but files, build SBT, and define libdep, library dependency, plus equals org Apache, lots of typos, yeah, I know, org Apache Spark. By the way, this keyboard is UK keyboard. I've been using, I was always using US keyboard, so some keys are in different locations, so I need to think twice what I'm typing now. So, okay, so Spark SQL, that's the beauty of upgrading everything before a live session. So, okay, so we are done, okay? We're done, we defined this dependency, enable auto import, don't forget about it, because you will see weird problems, even though they are no longer problems of this environment, but you not auto importing it. Okay, so now I can switch to this test, and now I've got this lovely help, builder, and get or create. We're done. Let's print our Spark version. Yay! Yeah. Okay, come on. Are we connected to internet? No, so it should work. It's part. So, you see, master URL must be set. We know it already. That's why it's part of test. Test is not part of this, production-ready code. So I can hard code my master, which is local star. We stars know that stars are nice. So master and local, no, it's not gonna be Kubernetes. No. I haven't upgraded it yet. So, and now, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, it works. Okay, so our environment is ready for, full-time coding. So, time 7 minutes before we have 10-minute break. Unless you, convince me to stay longer. But we've got another 40 minutes, so no worries. So let's do this. Let's format it in a proper way. Okay, and now, ladies and gentlemen, I do master, and now we know that it's a Spark version this. We've got Spark, so read and format and queue and then load and explain. Very good. And you know that what I did was just to describe my input data, and I explained the query plan, how to load data once this query is going to be executed. It's not going to be executed. It's only to be explained, okay? Just let's make this before break, and we are fine. So, let's run it. We should get this lovely class not found exception. You see, class not found exception, failed to find data source Hue. Very good. So what we can do is to, well, we need to register this data source. And this is this is undocumented feature. Well, it is part of Spark SQL code, but this is the trickiest part of this. I cannot leverage any code from Spark SQL here. I'm trying to be you while you are seeing this exception. So when you see this exception, let me see if you can click anything. Oh yeah, you can. Oh, very nice, very nice. Oh yeah. So you can click it, and you will see this code that I spoke about. You see, look up data source. And this is very nice, because that's exactly what I wanted to show you before our break. So look up data source. So I didn't forget. Thank you, Spark. So backward compatibility, we don't have to look at this. There is the map of what was supported back then, what's supported now. They changed the names. Some data sources like Avro are no longer Databricks. They are part of Spark SQL now. So blah, blah, blah. And look at this. These 3 lines are the most crucial to understand as far as this custom data source development is concerned. So first of all, Spark will try to find classes that extend data source register, and they are registered in this meta-inf services directory. Let's do this, okay? Let's create a class that's data source register, and just to meet requirements of this code, okay? So this time, that's gonna be part of my production-ready code. So Scala class. And this is going to be class, and this is hue relation provider. You will know in a moment why it's called relation provider. It's coming. Sorry to be ahead of what I'm going to explain. So hue relation provider, it's a class. Very good. But it extends this data source register. Okay, it's part of this lovely interface SQL sources, and it's public interface. Okay, so data source register is for people who are Spark developers, who are more sophisticated Spark developers, if I may put it this way. Okay, and we need to implement one thing. So implement short name, and now you know that this is exactly the name. I'm hard coding the name of my data source. Well, it won't change, right? Because if I open source it or if I release it, it will only support names that are, well, hue, for example. So it may be hard coded, okay? It's not something you will let people, configure, even though you could. So hue, is this enough? Well, enough from data source register perspective, but not from our code perspective. Let's see. So let's run it again. You should expect the very same error message. You see? Failed to find data source hue because we haven't done one thing. And look at this code again. This is Spark SQL's code. And look at this. This line uses Java's service loader contract. This contract says, and let me show you, because if I were you, I would click whatever happens to give me this exception. So click this load, start reading this, understand nothing, scroll up, blah, blah, yeah, keep going. Oh, yeah. You see? There was something about meta-inf services. Oh, meta-inf services. Let's see what's gonna happen. Let's hope I'm not gonna wipe out all my hard drive. So, services, let's go to main. This time it's gonna be directory, resources, and meta-inf services. Nice. And blah, 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 you read it, you got bored, after a minute, you said, oh, am I going to have to read this? It's going to take ages. So you see blah, 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 and then you realize that you need to support this interface, data source register. And this is exactly the name of the file that should be under this meta-inf services. There should be a file, what is new file, called in this weird way, data source, don't make any typos, register, okay? Enter, and this file is container of the class that implements data source register. So Spark SQL uses infrastructure, service infrastructure, kind of like OSGI. People who are older than me understand what I'm talking about. There's this nice environment. We are still, haven't really exploited OSGI yet. But again, this is a poor attempt at this OSGI in Java. I remember all this conversation. Anyway, so going back to our provider, well, we need to register it. But before I do this, I make things slightly easier. I create package and pila Spark, and I move this here because we all know that we should keep our types in packages, right? This unnamed package may or may not give us, fancy errors. We try to avoid it at all costs. So, and now, ladies and gentlemen, just 2 seconds before break, IntelliJ IDEA, give me this. Look at this, look at this. Come on, 0, 0. What was that? Yay, it works. You see, it works. Well, not really. We haven't finished yet, but seeing different error message tells us we are progressing. So now, guys, it's time, 10-minute break. So after 10 minutes, we finish this and we see more exceptions. We'll be even more happier. And then we finish it and we'll see our salary on our, our account. Okay, so see you in 10 minutes.